Hello everybody, my name is Philip Brookes and I'm the principal bassoonist of the Orchestra of the Swan. I've been asked to make some short videos for you talking about Mozart's Bassoon Concerto and also the opening of the Marriage of Figaro Overture, also by Mozart. But before we move on to those wonderful pieces, I've also been asked to tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to play the bassoon. I went to school in Birmingham, a junior school like everybody else does. I played the recorder and I sang. I also had piano lessons, which I wasn't very good, but I enjoyed music very much. Orchestral instruments didn't really feature in junior schools at the time. When I went to my secondary school, I was asked what I'd like to play, and I said I'd like to play the bassoon, which was a strange thing to say because I didn't know what it was. I had no idea how large the instrument was, and I only found out it was taller than myself when I had my first lesson. I was lucky to have lessons, as I was the only bassoonist in my school for 7 years. There was only one instrument available, so I timed it just right. So after school I went to the Birmingham Conservatoire, where I studied for 4 years with John Schroeder and Andrew Barnell, who were the bassoonists in the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra at the time. And I also had contrabassoon lessons with Toddy Harmon and later Margaret Cookhorn, also from the CBSO. After studying there, I had private lessons with John Orford, who's the principal bassoonist of the London Sinfonietta, a hugely influential person in my own life, in my way of playing and teaching. And he helped me get a place at the National Centre for Orchestral Studies, which was a wonderful course where young players had a chance to work as an orchestra for a whole year, giving weekly concerts, doing recordings for the BBC and other organisations. And it was a fantastic time for me. Really mirroring life in the profession. After my studies I moved back to Birmingham and I've freelanced widely in the Midlands ever since. This has been playing obviously with the Orchestra of the Swan, is my principal orchestra, but I also work occasionally with the CBSO, at the RSC, with Sinfonia Viva, but I've also been lucky enough to do a lot of opera playing. So in the early days I worked with something called City of Birmingham Touring Opera, doing absolutely amazing productions on tour. That later became Birmingham Opera Company. Really extraordinary organisation. I've also worked for Midwales Opera, which meant lots of tours, including 3 tours of Figaro, with a band of only 10 players, so a lot of work to do in there. And currently I work at Loughborough Festival Opera as well, and we've also played Figaro there. As well as my playing, obviously I do some teaching, mostly in Birmingham, but also in Warwick as well. So I think that's probably enough about me, but now I'd like to show you my instrument, the bassoon. My bassoon's in this case, and I thought it might be interesting for you to see how the instrument fits together. The German name for the bassoon is a fagot, das Fagot, which means a bundle of sticks. As you can see, it is a bit like a bundle of sticks. There are 4 large wooden pieces. The wood is maple, and the key work is silvered. The really unique thing about the bassoon is that there are 2 tubes together. It's not one long tube like the other woodwind instruments. So you can probably see there are 2 tubes in the butt joint, but if I take the cap off the end, you can see there's a U tube for the air to travel around the bottom. So when I blow down the bassoon, the air travels down the tenor joint, through the butt joint, up the long joint, and out of the bell at the top. It's nearly 2 metres long, so obviously if it was stretched out into one long piece it would be impossible to play, not just very difficult. So as with all the woodwind instruments, there are holes cut into the side of the instrument, and we use our fingers, and particularly for bassoonists our thumbs, to close and open those holes and get different notes. I just have a few more bits and pieces to fit on. To get the air into the instrument, I use a metal tube which is called a crook, and this fits into the top like this. As I'm sure you know, the bassoon is a double reed instrument, and I put the reed on the end of the crook. Here's my reed. Now we could talk for ages and ages about reeds and how they're made, but I'm not going to do that, you may be pleased to know. There are 2 pieces of cane. It's a little bit like bamboo, but it's called a rondo donax. They're cut, shaped and tied together. That's the shortest description of how to make a reed. and the air forced between the two blades of the reed will make a sound. Not a very exciting sound, but it goes on the crook, and hopefully now we get a nicer tone. So there's the bassoon for you. The modern bassoon has a fully chromatic range of 3.5 octaves, the lowest note being a B flat. And that's a super high F, a note we hardly ever have to play, I'm glad to say. Now Mozart's bassoon was very different to this. It was much lighter and it only had 4 keys, which meant that it didn't have some of the notes that we take for granted. You couldn't play a bottom B, and you couldn't play a low C sharp either. So those notes don't feature, and the very super high notes didn't come along until a little bit later. But it did have a 3-octave range. In the concerto, there's a low B flat and a high B flat as well, which is pretty amazing. The players must have been pretty special to be able to get all those notes out using rather more complicated fingerings than we do nowadays. So that's the bassoon. My bassoon is a Puckner made in the 1960s. It's quite heavy, partly because of the keywork, but mainly because the body of it is made out of a heavier, denser wood than classical instruments were made from. Traditionally, the bassoon is played with a neck strap, in the way that I'm playing just now. But when I play in the orchestra, I fix a spike to the bottom of my instrument, and that means I have to sit down to play.